takes a blowtorch to DEI in a fiery press conference. Good morning, Kuhner country. Okay, my friends, what a press conference yesterday. Holy shamoli. As you know, it is the biggest story in the country, in many ways the biggest story in the world. American Airlines from Wichita, Kansas, on its way to Reagan National Airport, and here is now the absolute latest that we know, was on a standard flight glide path to land at Reagan National. 60 passengers were on board, plus 4 crew members, 64 in total. Inexplicably, it then collided with a Black Hawk helicopter on an annual military training mission. There were 3 crew members on the Black Hawk. They never stood a chance. It now appears pretty convincingly that the Black Hawk inadvertently wandered onto the flight path of the American Airlines. And then boom, there was a massive midair collision several hundred feet above the Potomac River. It was a huge fireball. And then both of the helicopter and the plane then obviously fell into the Potomac. Initially, there were reports that there were 3 or 4 survivors. That turned out to be false. All 67 are dead. All of them. They have recovered about 30 bodies, dead bodies. They're still trying to recover more dead bodies. And the question now is, what went wrong? What went wrong? And what is now becoming very obvious is that one thing in particular went wrong. And I want to stress this. This is very important. What we're now being told is that the flight crew of American Airlines was a fairly or well-experienced flight crew. The Black Hawk helicopter crew was also a fairly experienced crew. So it wasn't lack of experience on the part of the pilots. What is inexplicable, and this is what President Trump, to his credit, addressed yesterday forcefully, aggressively, and to be honest with you, maybe even a little too aggressively. Okay, and I'm going to get to this in a second. But overall, I thought his larger point was completely correct. Completely correct. Why was the helicopter at the same altitude, at the same elevation as the plane? That is what is inexcusable. As Trump rightly said, he goes, look, I've been taking planes my whole life. I fly on a private plane. I'm always in the sky. Yes, you will see planes a little bit below you. You will see planes a little bit above you. Now, it's a bit, it's a bit unnerving. It's nerve-wracking. But the reason why that is in case there's a miscommunication and you're told to go left when you're supposed to go right, or you go right when you're supposed to go left, there's going to be no collision in the air. But instead, they were both at the same altitude. And now we know pretty much exactly what happened. There was a third plane. And if you look at the video, it's clear, just slightly above the helicopter. And so the air traffic controller, and by the way, we've also now found out there were supposed to be 2 air traffic controllers in the air tower. It turned out there was only 1. Only 1. And so one individual, to me, this is unthinkable. Honestly, I know technically according to FAA guidelines, you can have 1 and you can combine monitoring both helicopter traffic and plane traffic. I get it, but I'm sorry. the usual protocol, as many pilots have been telling me, and as air traffic controllers have been telling me, is no, Jeff. You want one person with a set of eyes on the planes and another person with their set of eyes on the helicopters. Duh. Well, not that night. That night there was only one, not two. And that person had a tremendous responsibility. Monitoring both plane traffic, and helicopter traffic. And then the air traffic controller, just before the accident, before the collision, radios the helicopter pilot and says, do you have a visual on the CRJ, which was the plane? And the helicopter pilot radios back, I have a visual, meaning I see it. But it now appears what that pilot was looking at was the plane above, not the American Airlines right in his path. And then, kaboom. Kaboom. They never stood a chance. And so, as I said on X, and this now bears repeating, and this is what was Trump's point, this collision, this tragedy, this horrific crash was completely 100% preventable. And it was fundamentally due to incompetence and human error. And for saying this, Trump is being raked over the coals. He is being the media is on the warpath. And you're blaming DEI? You're blaming DEI? How dare you blame diversity, equity, inclusion? How dare you? And by the way, what is most disgusting, we had a call yesterday. You remember Mark from Medford. It was about, give or take, 8:20, 8:25 in the morning. And he said, Jeff, how long do you think before the media starts blaming Trump? And I was naive. Sure, even the Kuhner man now is naive. I said, give him 3 hours. What 3 hours? Within another 15 minutes. By 8:30, 8:40, they were still pulling the bodies out of the Potomac. You still had people submerged under the water. CNN blaming Trump. Democrats blaming Trump. Liberals blaming Trump. You're blaming Trump? When the air traffic controller, and this is to me what is unforgivable, the air traffic controller never directed the pilot to the proper altitude. As I said on X yesterday, and I want to repeat this, the job of the air traffic controller is not to just ask the pilot, do you have a visual? I.e., do you see there's a plane, about 10 seconds away from smashing into you? You don't ask the pilot if they have a visual. That's too passive. That's incompetence. You're the air traffic controller. You got to take control of the situation. You got to say, hey, you're right on the flight path. Elevation, altitude. I need you to go here, now. Go here, now. That never happened. That never happened. And now, those 3 pilots are dead. 64 of the passengers on the American Airlines are dead, including, by the way, 14 members of the U.S. skating community. 6 of them, my friends, were our own, right here in Massachusetts, the Skating Club of Boston. And to make it even a little bit more personal for the Kuhner man, 6 of them live a couple towns over from where I live, in Norwood. 2 coaches, 2 skaters, teenagers, and their mothers. Because of air traffic controller negligence, incompetence, and error. And you're blaming Trump? What is he now? No, really, what is he, God? He's got to fly the planes? He's got to fly the helicopters? He's got to run the air traffic control tower now? Listen now to President Trump. I thought he was presidential. The country needed reassurance. They needed to know, are the skies safe? Can we trust to ever fly again? Will we clean up the mess, and it is a mess, at the FAA? Listen now to Trump. Roll cut. Oh, Mike, we're out of time already? Okay, I didn't hear you on the countdown. I'm going to play the cut coming back in, and I want to ask all of you, did DEI play a role in that fatal crash? Is Trump right? Your calls next. 6:18 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Listen now to Trump at his press conference, speaking to the entire country about that horrible, terrible crash that took place right near Reagan National Airport. Roll cut 49, Mike. Cut 49, Mike.
I speak to you this morning in an hour of anguish for a nation. Just before 9 p.m. last night, an American Airlines regional jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter carrying 3 military service members over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., while on final approach to Reagan National Airport. Both aircraft crashed instantly and were immediately submerged into the icy waters of the Potomac. Real tragedy.
And then he said this is going to be a dark night that is going to haunt this country for years to come. And that he is not going to forget what happened, and he's going to make sure that this never happens again. Roll cut 49B, Mike.
This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly, and we are a country of, really, we are in mourning. This is really shaken a lot of people, including people, very sadly, from other nations who were on the flight.
Now, Trump then told the country, look, we're on top of it. He brought in Pete Hegseth, forgive me. He then brought in, obviously, J.D. Vance and others. Sean Duffy, the transportation secretary, was working all night, working the phones, coordinating the response, the recovery, the rescue operations, saying we are going to make sure that the FAA now returns to the highest standards, both in terms of pilots, crews, and especially when it comes to air traffic controllers. Now, listen to President Trump, because he's 1,000% correct on this, saying, what I want answered and what needs to be answered is this. Roll cut 51, Mike.
So, we all saw the same thing. We've seen it many times. I've had the honor of hearing tapes. Tapes are scary, very scary tapes. You had a airliner coming in, American Airlines. He was doing everything right. He was on track. He was the same track as everybody else that came in. It's probably the same track as they've had for 25 years or more. He's coming in the path. And for some reason, you had a helicopter that was at the same height, obviously when they hit, but pretty much the same height, and going at an angle that was unbelievably bad.
How did that happen? I'm sorry, but this is inexcusable. How did that happen? And so Trump is then asking, well, we got some audio. We have the air traffic controller telling the pilot of the Black Hawk, do you see the plane? Do you see the plane? And Trump's like, what do you mean, do you see the plane? Your job is to direct the pilot, to direct the helicopter. You don't just leave it in the hands of the pilot, be so passive. Hey, there's a plane right there. Oh, it's about 10 seconds away. It's going to smack you to smithereens. Do you see it? Roll cut 51A, Mike.
When the air traffic controller said, do you see, he was talking about, do you see him? But there was very little time left when that was stated. And then also, he said, follow him in. And then almost immediately after that, seconds after that, there was the crash that took place. Well, you follow him in. That means like everything's fine. Follow him in. You had a pilot problem from the standpoint of the helicopter. I mean, because it was visual. It was a very clear night. It was cold but clear, and clear as you could be. The American Airlines plane had lights blazing. They had all of their landing lights on.
How does this happen? Now, this is where things got then crazy, and they've continued to be crazy ever since. This is where it's all blown up now. Trump then, and this is very important, please, all of you, you need to understand this. Trump then read from the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration's own website, okay, their own website, in which, under Obama, which then Trump rescinded, and then restored under Biden, and it's on their own website, that they are actively now recruiting people with, quote-unquote, severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. I'm not kidding. People who have all kinds of psychiatric problems, intellectual disabilities. You run down the epilepsy. Nothing against, look, please, people are epileptic. It's not your fault. But my God, what if you have a seizure flying a plane? What if you have a seizure and you're running air traffic control? This is who, under Pete Buttigieg, the worst transportation secretary we ever had in our country's history, and under Joe Biden, this is what you were trying to staff your FAA pilots and air traffic controllers with in the name of diversity and equity and inclusion. Listen now to Trump. How much time left? Okay, I'm going to play it on the other side. Now, please remember, when I play this, the media is acting. They're lying. They're saying, oh, Trump just, it was like stream of consciousness. He was just making it up. No, he was reading from the FAA's own website. And it was updated in March of 2022. So who was president then? Biden. Who was transportation secretary? Buttigieg. You're not going to believe who they were recruiting and hiring to be our traffic controllers and our pilots. 632 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, very quickly, because the lines are jammed, so I want to go to the phone lines. But Trump now made it clear yesterday in his press conference that he thinks DEI played a part in what happened, a role in what happened. And he obviously took a blowtorch to Pete Buttigieg and his disastrous leadership at the Secretary of Transportation, and especially over the Federal Aviation Administration, and Biden, and how they hired so many people for the sake of diversity while lowering standards across the board. Listen now to Trump. And again, I want to reiterate this. He's reading this from the FAA's own website, which they updated in March of 2022. Buttigieg was then the transportation secretary, and of course, Dementia Joe was the president. So, this is their FAA. I want you to listen now to what they were aggressively trying to recruit and hire across the entire Federal Aviation Administration. Honestly, it's shocking. It truly is shocking. We're not talking DEI in terms of race or gender. We're talking now DEI, intellectual disability, and psychiatric problems. Roll cut, Mike, roll cut 69, please.
I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was in January 14th, so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program.
So there you go. I mean, there you go. Now, he elaborated, okay? Because this is why I've been saying, and, you know, Dave, our Western PA correspondent in Pennsylvania, said, Jeff, please mention this. DEI equals die. DIE. When you're talking about people's lives, on planes, on trains, in ships, or police, or firefighters, or doctors, or surgeons, or nurses, or I could go on and on. You don't start playing with these sort of ridiculous quotas. Do you care what gender your pilot is? Do you care what race your pilot is? Do you care what sexual orientation your pilot is? I just want the best person for the job, period. I want colorblind. I want gender blind. I want merit-based hiring, period. The people who score the highest on the tests, who have the highest mental, psychological, emotional, physical abilities to do the job. These people were trying to recruit, again, nothing wrong. Well, epilepsy is, look, people suffer from all kinds of things. But you can't have somebody who's epileptic being a pilot of a plane. You're insane. Or being an air traffic controller. Why? Because they get seizures. And what happens if it happens on the job? As an example. Or there are some people, look, he's right. To be an air traffic controller is a very high stress, high performance job. As he puts it, you're playing 3D chess in the air. There's 40, 50, 60 planes coming in at once, within a 10, 15 minute period. You need someone, as he put it, with a lot of IQ, with high brain power. This is, we're not talking about some $25,000 a year paper pusher. When you're talking, life and death, you put nothing but the best. Listen now. Okay, this is him. Trump saying, look what they were actively trying to recruit under Buttigieg and under Biden. Roll cut 70. Mike.
You've committed that the FBI will not be politicized.
70, Mike.
Another article, the Federal Aviation Administration. This was before I got to office recently, second term, the FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? These are people that are, actually their lives are shortened because of the stress that they have. Brilliant people have to be in those positions, and their lives are actually shortened, very substantially shortened, because of the stress, where you have many, many planes coming into one target, and you need a very special talent and a very special genius to be able to do it.
It's obvious. As he put it, this is just common sense. Now, the media attacked him right away, saying, so you're blaming Democrats, DEI, and Biden for this, right? Where's your evidence? Where's your evidence? Well, if you want evidence, under Buttigieg, the FAA was a disaster. As I pointed out on X last night, Buttigieg and Biden turned the FAA into a woke DEI disaster. Plane parts were falling from the sky. Remember Alaska Airlines? Literally, the cockpit door just blew off. So you had plane parts falling from the sky. I'm going to read to you a story, not now, later. Washington Times, February 1st, 2024. 2024, a year ago. Chronic shortage of air traffic controllers. Chronic shortage of air traffic controllers. Why? Because they were hiring on race. And so they had tons of qualified white males who, by the way, scored 100% on the tests, were the most qualified by far candidates, but they were rejected for job after job as air traffic controllers. Job after job after job after job. Because they were obsessed with race and gender-based quotas. You want to know why there weren't two people in that room at the air traffic control tower? Because there was a chronic shortage of air traffic controllers under Buttigieg, under Biden, because they didn't want to hire based on merit. You have technology that they're using dating to the 1980s. That's how much they screwed things up under Biden and Buttigieg. And remember, Buttigieg himself was the ultimate DEI hire. The ultimate DEI hire. Why was he hired to be transportation secretary? Because he was gay. That's it. You remember that famous picture of him? What is it? They had him and his partner. What is it? They adopted a couple of kids, a couple of babies. Do you remember that? And he had this plastic chest feeder that looks like two female breasts, and it's made of plastic. And he puts it over his his chest, and he's feeding the baby, through one of the artificial nipples. Okay, the chest feeder. So that's what he was doing while he was supposed to be transportation secretary. This is all at the feet of Buttigieg and Biden. Now, the only thing that I fault Trump for, otherwise I thought his press conference was bang on. I thought it was a brave, strong, frankly reassuring press conference. Clearly on DEI, on the larger point, he's completely right. Not 100, 1,000% correct. Where I do fault Trump, and I don't want to seem like I'm nitpicking, but I did cringe when he said specifically at one point that DEI was to blame or played a key role in this particular collision. Now, maybe he knows something we don't, okay? I'll grant that. But I'm like, well, we don't know that. We don't know that the helicopter pilots were DEI hires. In fact, it looks like they weren't. And that air traffic controller, we don't know if that air traffic controller was a DEI hire. We don't know that. So he kind of, I thought, jumped the gun a little bit and potentially opened himself up to criticism. And I'm just thinking of the family members. 67 dead. You want to know exactly what happened, why, and who's to blame. I don't think it was helpful for him to insert DEI as in terms of the cause of the crash. I thought that was 6:49 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, so just a quick clarification, because many of you are reacting to what the Kuhner man just said before the break. And this is from Rob as an example on Messenger, and he's upset, and I don't blame him. Jeff, where's your evidence? It's freaking floating in the Potomac. And, I mean, yes, and Rob is right. I mean, that's evidence of incompetence. There's no question. He's completely right. There was gross incompetence, gross human error. This was completely preventable, 1,000%. My only point is, for example, we now know that the lead pilot on the Black Hawk helicopter was a white male, an experienced white male. So that wasn't a DEI hire. Now, as for the air traffic controller, we don't know if the air traffic controller was a DEI hire. I'm not trying to nitpick. I'm just saying, look, for clarity's sake, I think what Trump should have done, he could have done this. That's what I meant when I said maybe a little bit too aggressive. Yes, say, look, we got a problem across the bureaucracy. We got a problem across the FAA. We got a problem in our whole transportation system because of Biden and Buttigieg. Now, and he did say this, to be fair. He says, well, look, we don't yet know the exact cause of the collision. We don't know specifically what made the air traffic controller make the decision that person made. So he did say, look, on this particular case, we don't know if it was DEI, this specific one. So he did, put in some caveats. But the impression he gave was that, well, this was caused by DEI. And I'm like, well, we don't know that. Now, maybe it's true. Now, and this is why you're saying, well, Jeff, why are you parsing hairs? Because what the Washington Times article states is that there's a 3,000 white male air traffic controllers were deliberately not hired under Biden and Buttigieg because they wanted to hit these race, gender-based quotas. So the problem is, but, they tried to lower standards, but there's still a chronic shortage. So there were not enough air traffic controllers across the country. That's why at Reagan National, there should have been 2 in the tower. There was only 1 in the tower. And what the Washington Times article also points out, and this is to me, again, unforgivable, is because of this obsession over DEI, and they were not hiring qualified white men who were acing the tests and getting 100 out of 100 on all the attributes needed to be an air traffic controller, is that then the current crew of air traffic controllers are working much longer hours. In fact, mandatory longer shifts, overtime, weekends. They were complaining of burnout and overwork. And that's another point that Trump was making yesterday. So what I'm saying is the air traffic controller, having to monitor both helicopter and air traffic, and plane traffic, and God knows maybe overworked, exhausted. It may not be that the person is a DEI hire. It just may be that person was so run down and so overwhelmed with responsibilities that a mistake was inevitable. And this is my larger point. For years, For years, under Biden and Buttigieg, for years, there was whistleblower after whistleblower after whistleblower that came out and said, you don't know how many near misses there have been, not just at Reagan, but at some of our biggest airports in the country. We don't have enough air traffic controllers, and that they're overworked, and that they're working ridiculous long hours. They're exhausted. They're doing overtime after overtime after overtime, and that the technology is 30, 40 years old. Here, how could you not have sensors? To me, my car has a sensor that if I'm about to get into an accident or anything close, it starts warning me like crazy, and then the brakes will even lock. We don't even have basic technology upgrades. Why? Because of Buttigieg and Biden. And so you had air traffic controller after air traffic controller warning us, saying there's going to be a massive accident. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. There are just too many near misses. And finally, yesterday, you keep playing, as I said on another show, when I did a radio interview, I said, you keep playing Russian roulette, someone's eventually going to die. And that's what happened yesterday. So my point is this. Trump's been in office for what, 10 days? He's the one trying to increase the standards at the FAA? Who lowered the standards at the FAA? Buttigieg. Who wouldn't modernize the technology system? Buttigieg. Who guaranteed that there was a chronic shortage of air traffic controllers? Buttigieg. Who had plane parts falling from the sky? Buttigieg. And that's what Trump was getting at yesterday. He goes, he has made such a mess that now we got to clean up his dirty work. One more cut that I want to go to the phone lines. Listen to Trump saying no one ran the FAA more badly than he did. And now we've got the mother of all collisions and crashes. Roll cut 71. Mike.
The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit. The Department of Transportation, his government agency charged with regulating civil aviation. Well, he runs it, 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity.
I agree with him. My God, I think if anyone owns this, it's him. It's Buttigieg. If anyone owns what happened, ultimately, it was the mistake, I believe, of the air traffic controller. Maybe the pilot a little bit, but I think it was the air traffic controller. There no way should they have been at the same altitude. No way. That was unforgivable. 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 And then not being directed to another spot, another altitude immediately. But you want to talk about the mess in the air? The mess in air traffic control towers? The antiquated, dated technology system? This is what happens when you put a man who openly admitted that the only qualification he had to be transportation secretary was that he proposed to his lover at an airport. And so he finds planes and airports romantic and sexy. This is what happens. Agree, disagree. So let me ask you, double-barreled question. Number one, should the Federal Aviation Administration be trying to get people with intellectual and psychological or psychiatric disabilities to be pilots, to be air traffic controllers, and to work at some of the most dangerous, sensitive positions in the country? I say it's insane. What say you? And number two, is Trump right? Did DEI play a role, maybe even a critical role, in that tragic crash over the Potomac River. 617-266-6868 is the number. John in Plymouth. Thanks for holding, John, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure, John.
My brother, I come from a long line of pilots. My father was a pilot. I have two nephews that are pilots. My niece is training to be a pilot, and my brother is a retired pilot from American Airlines, 40-plus years. We were talking about this the other day, and he said, sometimes it's difficult to see other aircraft at night because the lights of the aircraft can easily blend into the lights on the ground if the angle is just right. However, the helicopter stated that he had the RJ, which means regional jet, in sight, while the RJ was much higher than him and descending. It only had the sky as a background at that time. Obviously, this was the helicopter's fault. Twice he stated that he had it in sight, and twice he was granted maintain visual separation. That means he's responsible to avoid the RJ and not rely on the controller to give him instructions on where to turn, etc. He was instructed to pass behind the RJ, but instead hit him from the forward right of the jet. So horrible. If you're not sure you have the traffic in sight, you just say negative contact. Then the controller would tell him to turn immediately. He goes on to say, the fact the helicopter pilot requested visual separation relieves the controller. However, he should have canceled the helicopter's visual clearance when he saw the imminent collision unfolding. I can't say he's 100% at fault, though. The helicopter pilot is also complicit.
Yeah, I think you probably nailed it, John. I think, in other words, there's blame, on both. And I think what complicated everything, John, and again, you may disagree with me, is that there was another plane in the picture. And so I think there was a kind of a bit of a miscommunication. I think the pilot is looking at the plane above and saying, no, I got it. But the air traffic controller is talking about the American Airlines flight that's coming, right on the glide path. And I think it was that communication mix-up, that misunderstanding. That was, I think, the toxic cocktail, the combination that led to what happened. Agree? Disagree?
I would agree. The other thing that comes into play here, I believe DEI is involved, because he said this particular control tower was supposed to be staffed with 30 people. There was only 19. The other thing that comes into play here is the controller was working. He was doing the job of two controllers. Military aircraft is on a separate frequency, so he had to keep switching back and forth from the commercial jet to the military aircraft. Well, it may not seem like a lot, but that's delay. And he's having to do both jobs of one person or of two people.
John, you're completely right. That to me is what's inexcusable. That's why, people are very upset at me. You're saying, well, how dare you, go after Buttigieg? I'm sorry, but Trump has only been president for 10 days. The guy's not God. For 4 years, Buttigieg and Biden laid siege to the FAA. And look, let me just read to you here, please, John. I want to get your take on this. Okay. Here it is. All right. Look, this is the Washington Times, my former paper. Look it up. February 1st, 2024. I'm just going to read to you the headline. FAA turned away qualified air traffic controllers based solely on race. Again, this is a year ago. Let me just read to you the opening line. Quote, the disturbing rise in near misses at our nation's airports is no accident. And then it goes on to talk about this massive class action lawsuit against the Federal Aviation Administration. Why? Because they refused to hire 3,000 perfectly well qualified white males. These were all applications, super qualified, but they were the wrong race and the wrong gender. And so because of this, and by the way, the FAA recorded, this is in the article, this was just in, this is 2024. The FAA recorded 2 serious near-miss runway incursions at Reagan National and Baltimore Washington International last year. It's basically in 2023. So the article is saying, look, it's so bad that we basically almost had a collision at Reagan National, which ended up happening, unfortunately, a couple days ago, and at Baltimore Washington International. Now, vigilance is waning. I'm reading straight from the article. Vigilance is waning because the nation's air traffic control towers, this goes to your point, are woefully understaffed. The people responsible for keeping planes from smashing into one another are tired after working long, mandatory overtime shifts to make up for the lack of controllers. And then why? Because they had this diversity initiative. So they had to put on the brakes on hiring. So they could then change the rules. So they could have people hired based on race, based on gender. Then unbelievably under Biden, based on intellectual psychiatric disabilities. Which is to me insane. And so, anyway, so here it is. More than 3,000. Okay, listen to this now. More than 3,000, according to the article, more than 3,000 air traffic control, top performing, motivated applicants lost out because they weren't members of this ethnic club. So there you go. And then the article literally ends with, if we don't change this, we're going to have a collision or a crash and people are going to die. And John, almost right on cue a year later, we had what happened at Reagan National. Final word to you.
Jeff, this was so avoidable, and here to add to this, we're lucky, and I don't say this lightly. We're lucky this has been the only crash in this particular area, because this is normal flight patterns for military Blackhawks. They always cross and overlap incoming aircraft. We're lucky this is the only one that's happened. This has got to stop. They got to change these flight patterns. There's no reason for a Blackhawk to be flying in the path of any commercial airliner or any overlapping of flight paths, especially when you're coming in on approach.
It's unforgivable.
There's nothing the jet could do. Nothing the jet could do.
Oh, I agree. No, I agree. I completely agree. John, as always, thank you very much for that call. Okay, we have not heard from him for a while. I don't blame him. Poor guy. He guaranteed a Kamala Harris victory. Said it was 100% to 0 she was going to win based on January 6th, because that was the worst atrocity that committed on the United States since the Civil War. So he's been silent for a couple of months. But like Lazarus, he has now risen from the dead. Bill in Sudbury. Bill, nice to hear from you, my friend, and welcome.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I kind of agree with the last point of that last caller, that maybe we shouldn't be shuttling these guys back and forth by helicopter. It's a 10-minute cab ride from Reagan to the Pentagon. Maybe they should drive and not fly back and forth quite so frequently. I kind of think there's probably something with that. But you don't get the implication of what the president said yesterday. You don't see the pattern. You say he's only been president for a week. Yeah, but we watched him for 4 years, so we have some sense of how he operates. And the unfortunate implication of what he said yesterday is if a black woman is unfortunately sitting in any of those chairs, well, that's the reason, and we can all go home. That's the implication of what he said, and that's what's totally shameful about it. You should be decrying it. The fact that you're smoothing it out and making excuses for that is shameful.
Well, Bill, did you watch the press conference?
Yes, I did, and I thought it was horrible. The firemen are fishing bodies out of the sea, and he's talking about Pete Buttigieg. He didn't give a crap about any of that. His first job was to absolve himself of any responsibility, because remember, he's not responsible for anything, ever.
Well, hold on now. Now you're playing politics. How is he to blame for what happened at Reagan? You're saying he's absolving himself of responsibility. What's his responsibility?
Responsible for his words that he said from the podium yesterday.
No. You said no, Bill.
Yes,
let's not change. No. Bill, come on now. Let's be honest for once. You said he's trying to absolve himself of his own responsibility. So, what was he responsible for in terms of the crash? He has no responsibility to absolve himself of. He didn't fly the plane. He didn't fly the chopper. He wasn't in the tower. So how can Trump be blamed for what happened? Are you blaming him for what happened?
Not blaming him for what happened, but he's the president of the United States, and some responsibility eventually lands on him. And your automatic thing, oh, no, he's only been...
Are you telling me, hold on now, are you telling me that if a plane crashes in the United States, the president is automatically responsible? If there's a car accident, the president is responsible? Are you serious? And, you conveniently ignore what a disaster Pete Buttigieg was. Did you forget all those planes falling out of the sky? Did you forget the trains derailing and the chemical spills? Did you forget the ships slamming into the bridges? By the way, who is the one that caused the chronic shortage of air traffic controllers? Now it's coming out there should have been at least 2 people following that plane and the helicopter. There was only 1. Who was the one that led to the chronic shortage of air traffic controllers? It wasn't Trump. It was Buttigieg. So what? We're supposed to pretend that the last 4 years didn't happen, Bill? That your people didn't drive this country into the ground? Bill. Not a good start for you, Bill. 719 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, Trump holds a fiery, very strong press conference yesterday where he clearly said, look, we don't quite know exactly why. We'll find out very soon what happened, who exactly was to blame for the collision that now killed 67 people over right near Reagan National Airport. But he said there's no question. DEI, Buttigieg, Biden's policies of diversity, DEI, wokeness have lowered standards across the board, especially in transportation, especially at the FAA, and that this now is going to change and must change. Do you agree with Trump? 617-266-6868 is the number. Or do you agree with the media and Democrats and liberals who say that Trump should not have politicized his press conference yesterday, that's what they claim, by attacking DEI and attacking Buttigieg's leadership as transportation secretary? 617-266-6868. Listen now to Trump. He's elaborating now, reading from the FAA's own website, about what kind of intellectual, psychological, psychiatric disabilities as part of the FAA's diversity hiring program regarding air traffic controllers in particular. Roll cut 70A. Mike.
Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country, pouring into a little spot, a little dot on the map, a little runway. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan. Think of that. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite.
He's completely right. I mean, my God. Look, I'll be honest with you, okay? I didn't think it was that bad. I knew it was bad, but I didn't think it was that bad. Epilepsy, seizures, psychological, psychiatric, intellectual disabilities, paralyzed, completely paralyzed, and you want to put them on as air traffic controllers? One of the most stressful, high-performance jobs in the world, where literally hundreds of people's lives are at stake, coming in, flight after flight after flight after flight. These people are mad. This is insane. And as John said, one of our previous callers, I'm not trying to diminish what happened. My heart breaks for what happened to those poor 67 people. But we're lucky it wasn't more. This is criminal. And notice, how does this quote-unquote diversity, this is the heart of the mission of the FAA? To hire dwarfs? To hire people with severe mental disabilities? People who have seizures? Psychiatric problems? That's your main... No, your main mission is to hire the best, most qualified people, period, so that our skies are safe. Ding dong. Stupid. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, ay, ay. And then you got people like Bill and Sudbury. I blame Trump. Trump. 617-266-6868. Agree, disagree. Mike in Florida. Thanks for holding, Mike, and welcome.
Good morning, Jeff from sunny South Florida. I completely agree with it. Quick shout out to your producer, Mike, I used to work with in another lifetime. He does a great job for you. Anyway, I had the privilege, my dad worked in the Pentagon, and I lived in Springfield, Virginia, near Arlington, and I can tell you the pathway or the flight paths between BWI, Andrews Air Force Base, Dulles, Reagan, is one of the busiest probably in the world. I don't know for a fact, but I know Andrews Air Force Base from being a military brat was one of the busiest corridors, and they hired the best. They didn't hire somebody based on what music they listened to, what religion they were. They hired the best of the best. And it seems the last administration's kind of done away with that, and look what we have on our hands. I completely agree with John, one of your previous callers who had some aviation experience, that you're either qualified for the job or you're not. It's like teaching at Yale or Harvard. Are you qualified or are you not? It's not whether you have yellow hair or brown hair or whatever. It's based on merit, and I'm really encouraged by this Trump administration that they're trying to make things merit-based. Do you agree?
I completely agree. Mike, I agree with you completely. Please don't get me wrong. But we're not talking Yale or Harvard. Again, you should always hire the best person for the job. Okay, for many reasons. A, just because of fairness. You work hard, You're the most qualified. You should get the job. But let's be honest. If you have a diversity hire at Yale or Harvard, you're shafting the students. It's wrong. But people aren't going to die. When you start applying this DEI woke affirmative action to the skies, to pilots, to air traffic controllers, doctors, surgeons, you're going to get people killed. 7:31 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay. It is the Kuhner Country poll question of the day, sponsored by Mario's. Mario's quality roofing, siding, and windows. If you are on a plane guided by an air traffic controller, okay, this is the key question now. Who would you prefer? An air traffic controller that had been hired under A, Biden, or B, Trump? In other words, would you want an air traffic controller under the diversity, equity, inclusion programs aggressively promoted under Biden, or the colorblind, merit-based new programs that Trump literally just signed an executive order regarding the FAA under Trump? Which air traffic controller would you rather have guiding your plane? The one hired under A, Biden, or B, Trump? To me, it's a no-brainer, unless you have a suicide wish. To me, honestly, it's Trump all the way. I want merit. I want the best person for the job. I don't care if they're white, black, brown, Asian, purple, green, man, woman, young, old, gay, straight. I don't care. I just want to know, are you mentally stable? Are you operating at a very high level? And can you handle the massive stress that comes with being an air traffic controller? If you can, that's all I care about, baby. Best person for the job. But that's me. I want to hear from you. You can vote on our webpage, wrko.com/Kuhner, wrko.com/Kuhner, Kuhn as in Nancy, ER, or if you prefer, you can vote via X. Last night I was super active. My handle there, all one word, at the Kuhner Report, Kuhn as in National, ER, at the Kuhner Report. This is from Mark on Messenger. Jeff, and it's true, he's completely right. Jeff, I'm sorry, but if I knew ahead of time that there were people with psychiatric problems or mental health issues guiding my plane in for a landing or taking off, knowing how stressful that job is, I don't think I would get on that flight. What say you? I swear to you, not only do I agree with you, Mark, 1,000%, had I known that the FAA had those so-called hiring quotas with intellectual disabilities, people with, you're going for with epilepsy, people with psychiatric problems, I never would have flown. I swear to you. I'd be like, nah, I'll drive. Well, Jeff, it'll take you forever. At least I'll get there in one piece, man. I swear I would not have flown. Had I known, I would not have flown. 617-266-6868. Eric, again, on fire. I got to tell you, this audience is killing it. This is Eric on Messenger. Jeff, the problem with the Democrat Party's DEI program is that it's always trying to fit the square peg into the round hole. And I am pissed that people had to die to prove it. Next time I get surgery for anything, I'm going to ask, can I have a doctor that has hand tremors? Because I'm a liberal. I mean, that's what they're basically asking for. Are you blind? Yeah. Perfect. We want you as the heart surgeon. Hold on. Your hands shake like me, for example. Okay, I don't know, my hands always shake. I don't know why, they just do. And, like one member in our family said, hey, I want to be a doctor, maybe a surgeon. I said, I could never do that job. Why? I said, look at my hands. I don't know if it's just too much caffeine but my hands shake. I could never be a surgeon. You're crazy if you hire me as a surgeon. They turned our skies and our planes into social engineering experiments. That's what they did under that DEI Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. And it came back to haunt us. 617-266-6868 is the number. Agree, disagree. Gina in West Roxbury. Thanks for holding, Gina, and welcome.
Dr. Gina.
Dr. Gina, how are you?
Hi, I'm good but upset. I wanted to raise some psychological issues as it pertains to this situation.
Yes.
Yes, I agree with you that absolutely merit. I don't care what the job is. And I knew about this hiring plan by the FAA a long time ago. I remember hearing it on the radio. I don't remember what show I was listening to. But the limitations that they were accepting as being okay for the job, I almost jumped through the roof. A couple of things just from a psychological standpoint. Before this incident, Schumer is already talking about impeachment. Just the day before this incident, there was a near miss in the same corridor. When I saw the president come out and make his statement, I felt such compassion for him. I thought he was going to burst into tears. So there's a lot of stress on him as he's talking. I think one of the mistakes he makes is he assumes his audience can fully understand what he's saying. The problem is with his audience, the journalistic audience, they are sitting there waiting for a getcha. And when they heard DEI, they were triggered. I hate that word, but they launched on that word. They no longer heard the rest of what he was saying. I think he could have been a little more clear when he used the concept of DEI. He wasn't talking about the particulars of the pilots in either of the planes. It was the situation. But if the media had the ability to open their ears and hear what he was saying, they would realize that he was talking about the systemic problem in the FAA, the chronic underemployment. There was no, low staffing. The staffing problem didn't just start the day of the accident. The staffing problem has been on the books for a long time, and people have notified the ones in the higher ups in the FAA, the employees, external sources coming up and making reports, and Buttigieg and Biden and whoever was the Biden machinery running the show did absolutely nothing. Before he even took the podium, the media was already talking about the fact that it was his fault. So he's walking into a situation where he wants to be compassionate, which he was. He held it together. I was impressed with that. And he's also trying to address the delicate issue of DEI and raise that stake that you have to look at the whole picture. It's not just this accident. And I don't care if both pilots in both planes were the best, the smartest, the brightest, the most capable, the most flexible. They were working in an environment where, why don't you cut the legs out from under them? You can be perfectly prepared, perfectly capable, perfectly flexible, perfectly psychologically intact. But if you put it in an environment where the whole environment is set up for failure, there's going to be failure. When 19 people are supposed to be in that tower and 11 people are there, that means that everybody is making up for the loss of the other staff.
You nailed it. No, Gina, you nailed it. Look, you're on fire. I'm telling you, you're on fire. And I agree with you. Again, I said I don't want to seem like I'm splitting hairs or nitpicking, but that's the only thing. I said, look, he's talking about the culture at the FAA, okay? The larger culture. And he goes, that's DEI. And it corrupted the whole thing. And he's right. But we don't know if the specific area, the controller or the pilot were DEI hires. So they pounced on that. Okay, that he didn't quite make that distinction. Now, you got what he was saying. I got what he was saying. Most people did. But the media pounced over that. And I just want to read this to you, Gina, okay? Because you're a psychiatrist, correct? Yes. Okay. So our resident psychiatrist of Kuhner Country. This is from the New York Post, just so that people know where I'm citing. January 14, 2024. So this is over a year ago. Okay. The Federal Aviation Administration is now actively recruiting workers based on a new diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. And I want to read it. Quote, targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. They include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism. For air traffic controllers, Dr. Gina, final word to you.
FAA's best employee would be...
Mike. You're killing me, Mike. These breaks are killing me. Dr. Gina, I hear you. Thank you very, very much for that call. Charles Manson, really, Charles Manson is a 749 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, just to reinforce what Dr. Gina in West Roxbury said, this is now being reported. So the day before that fatal crash at Reagan National Airport, just one day before, another American Airlines flight, listen to this, this one coming in from Connecticut, en route to Reagan National Airport, was forced to abort its landing. Why? Because due to a helicopter. So apparently now they were forced to loop around after a helicopter crossed its flight path near Reagan Airport on Tuesday evening, about 24 hours before that fatal crash, just before Reagan National Airport by American Airlines from Wichita, Kansas. So they almost had a crash and a collision the day before. So clearly there's something going on at Reagan National. And I think it's pretty obvious. They were understaffed at the air traffic control tower. They didn't have enough people, probably overworked, long hours, exhausted, stretched too thin, and they were just making mistake after mistake. And let me just throw this log on the fire. Why do we have military helicopters crisscrossing airports, especially the one at Reagan? Really, like Reagan Airport, I've taken it, I've flown in and out of Reagan, many times. When I was overseeing the White House congressional coverage at the Washington Times, that was my favorite airport, especially when I would go up to Montreal to visit my parents and see them, especially when they were sick. So I can't tell you how many times I've come in and out of Reagan. It's a very compact airspace around Reagan. It's a very congested airspace. There's a lot of planes, and you see helicopters all the time. All the time. Now, I get it. They're flying military brass to the Pentagon. The Pentagon is nearby. You've got Marine One as well. They're flying military leaders for them to give briefings. I understand. But what's wrong with taking a car? I'm just saying, it seems to me when you got that much commercial air traffic coming into that airport, why do you need to, clutter the skies with helicopters? And as Larry and Lemonster and others have been telling me, you look at Black Hawk helicopters in particular, they can't see above them very well. In other words, their range of vision is a tad limited by the nature of the helicopter. And so you're going to add that to already one of the most highly congested air traffic zones or areas in the entire world. And as I said on Irish radio yesterday, and I want to repeat it, the problem is we keep putting profits before people. It's time we start putting people before profits. And you know me, I'm a big free market guy, love capitalism, nothing wrong with making a profit. But when you're dealing with people's lives, why not take Dulles Airport? There's another major airport, Dulles. I also used to go through Dulles, 45 minutes away, but people don't want to go to Dulles. And so that's why they kept diverting more and more flights to Reagan. Why? Because Reagan is closer, Reagan is more convenient, Reagan, frankly, is cheaper. No, I understand. Yeah, only long-term flights fly out of Dulles. But what I'm just saying is, in other words, they're diverting more and more flights to Reagan because it saves you money. You don't have to drive as far. It's cheaper. It's much more convenient, obviously, because you're much closer to the city than you are in Dulles. And if Reagan can't handle all that congestion, then build another airport. But to just keep packing more planes and more planes and more planes, and then adding more and more helicopters, leave aside the air traffic control issue for a second. There's only so much space. Look, in the end, I think Trump was right. This was a confluence of forces and a confluence of bad decisions. Agree, disagree, 617-266-6868. Rick in Quincy. Thanks for holding, Rick, and welcome.
Hello?
You're on the air. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, sorry. Jeff, can I identify the people behind the scenes, before World War III starts? Yes, because that's going to be a very, very frightening distraction. So we must identify the enemy. And can I please identify the enemy?
Rick, I don't mind, but what does this have to do with the crash?
These are the people behind this, DEI.
Go ahead. Okay, yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead, Rick. Yes, please, go.
BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street.
Well, yeah, they were aggressively pushing DEI. No question. Absolutely no question. And they're some of the most powerful corporations and globalists in the entire world, with very deep pockets and tentacles that reach way into the Democratic Party, way into the political establishment. You're completely right, Rick. Rick, I'm just curious. Do you think Trump is right when he says DEI played a key role, an important role in this collision and this crash?
Always spot on, because he speaks the God's honest truth. And that's a fact. And these people that don't want to see facts, to hell with them, because your facts, facts don't care about your feelings. And Buddha age and people like that, they're just a symptom of this disease, because they've been elevated on purpose to do these things. And whether wittingly or unwittingly, they're all guilty as hell.
Rick, I can't disagree with you. I think you hit the nail right on the head. Rick, thank you very, very much for that call. I really appreciate it. 617-266-6868 is the number. No, this is what I just find a little bit disconcerting. Like, is anybody going to be held accountable for this? 67 people are dead. 67 people. 3 warriors, 64 passengers, 14 members of the, U.S. ice skating team or community. And, as Grace said to me last night over dinner, and she's very upset about this. Really, hot under the collar. And by the way, she loved Trump's presser completely. She said, she goes, one of his best moments. Why? Because the country needs to be reassured. And that's what he did. That's why he went up and say, listen, look, we're going to get rid of DEI. We're going to make this a merit-based Federal Aviation Administration. Everything in the government. But I'm talking about the airplanes, the pilots, the air traffic controllers, the staff, everybody. I want to reassure you, we're going to only keep the best. We're only going to hire the best. Period. So don't be afraid to fly, because the public needed to be reassured. And Trump reassured the public. But, she made a very good point to me. Look, I'm not diminishing, she says, anybody that died. Please, no life is more important than the other. But you know what a beautiful art figure skating is? Truly. And, ice figure skating and how many years of effort it takes to pull off that kind of beauty and artistry on ice. And what a beautiful gift it is to people who watch it. And to just see 14 of them gone, like this, in their prime, gone. And as I said earlier, 6 of them our own from Massachusetts, Skating Club of Boston. They lived a couple towns away from me in Norwood. 2 coaches, by the way, world-renowned coaches. 2 teen skaters. Phenomenal, beautiful, talented skaters in their prime, and their mothers. And we're just gonna stand there and say, well, hey, mistakes happen. Hey, they had a bad night. What can you do? Or if you're the Bill in Sudbury, and the left, these idiots on social media, impeach Trump, blame Trump. So that's it now? We're just going to blame Trump? That's your solution to everything? More hate? More Trump derangement syndrome? How does this happen? I'm sorry, how does this happen? How does a military helicopter, a Black Hawk, be on the very same altitude and elevation as a commercial jetliner, the American Airlines, on a glide path to land? I'm sorry, how the blank does this happen? This is inexcusable. Now, I'm sorry, man. Heads need to roll. Or am I wrong? 617-266-6868 is the number. Now, look, to be fair, and this is a very important point, there are 40,000 flights in the United States a day. 40,000 a day. 2.9 million Americans fly every single day. 2.9, let's not quibble, okay? 3 million. 40,000 flights a day. 3 million Americans flying every single day. That's a lot of air traffic. That's a lot of people flying. That's a lot of planes in the sky. So when everything is said and done, and this needs, you need to be reminded. People need to be reminded of this. Crashes are really rare. They're incredibly rare. I mean, it's almost a miracle that we don't have more accidents. 40,000 flights a day. 3 million Americans every single day are flying. But still, when you look at this particular tragedy, I mean, it was so avoidable. It was so preventable. And to me, there's no question. It was due to incompetence and error. And that the Democrats are trying to turn this into blaming Trump, that the media are trying to turn this into blaming Trump, as they're still pulling bodies out of the Potomac, with family members now waiting to see if their loved ones may have survived. It's beyond disgusting. It's beyond disgusting. 8 o'clock, Kuhner's call log, caller of the week.
It's time for Kuhner's Call Log, where we showcase our favorite caller from the week.
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Thanks for holding, Morris.
What gets me with these liberals like Selena Gomez is they caused the problem. They allowed these people to come here. I didn't see any tears when Lake and Riley got murdered. I didn't see any tears when 300,000 illegal children went missing. I didn't see any tears, when these people are getting killed, cutting through Panama on their way here and getting raped and murdered and extorted. All these tears for criminals getting hauled out of here who have horrible, horrible records. For these people to be outraged by it, they caused the problem. They were looking out for themselves, selfishly hoping that these people are going to be able to vote, and they screwed over 20 million people, whether they were criminals, good people, bad people, whatever it is. It's the Democrats' fault. All I see are these tears and this guy's bad, that guy's bad. You destroyed these people's lives by inviting them to come here. Should never have done it to begin with. That's where it all started. And I just can't see how they don't see it. And they're more outraged over Donald Trump pardoning January 6 people than they are at the murderers, rapists, and child molesters that have been allowed to come into this country. I'm glad we're coming out of bizarro world, but I still think we're kind of there.
All my people are getting attacked. I don't understand. I'm so sorry. I wish I could do something, but I can't. I don't know what to do. I'll try everything, I promise.
Be here every weekday on the Kuhner Report between 6 and 10 a.m. And next week, it could be you on Kuhner's Call Log.
Please, don't be a stranger. Call again. Shut up. He said Selena Gomez. No, really. Listen, dry your eyes. Don't weep for rapists, okay? Okay, Selena? Don't cry for murderers and rapists. All right, 8:03 now, 8:04, forgive me, on the great WRKO, 617-266-6868. So let me ask you, who do you think is ultimately responsible for that deadly plane crash near Reagan Airport? Trump says DEI played a role. Do you agree? And he says in many ways, look at Biden, look at Buttigieg. Do you agree with the president? 617-266-6868. And should heads roll? Should people be fired? Should people be held accountable? And liberals are blaming Trump for what happened. Do you think they have a point? Or do you think this is more insane Trump derangement syndrome? Lines are loaded. Nick in Weymouth. Thanks for holding, Nick, and welcome.
So it's Trump's fault. He's let me see, several weeks on the job. No, this is what the word they love to use, systemic. This is a systemic problem created by the liberals over a number of years. You hit it right on the head, and Trump, I'm sorry, when you said the military stuff. Well, training flight in the midst of that kind of traffic? No, you do that someplace else. It's obvious it's a no-no because look what just happened, right? Yeah, it's a chance in a billion, chance in a million, but it happened, and it can happen again. So no. Whoever got together from the FAA and the military people and the local government people to allow something like that, they are the problem, the people that made those decisions. Also, too, we do not have the complete dialogue, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, of the air traffic controller. Yeah, I heard that technical jargon where they surrender control to the helicopter. I don't think they should have surrendered control whatsoever. That should have been anticipated. They have the hardware. They have the software, for God's sakes. The computers are telling them what to do, right? The computers, it's not AI, in a sense it somewhat is, obviously, but they're the ones that should be controlling control. I heard some expert on Fox saying, well, it's kind of like trying to get on the, he's an aircraft expert. You're trying to get onto an exit or ramp or entrance ramp on a highway. They're getting on, you're getting off, and unfortunately there's like human error. Yeah, Unfortunately, there are no highway controllers, are there? Right? That's why they have them at the airport. So I think, in that sense, they should have kept their control and told them what to do. The other thing is, it is systemic. It is a huge problem. The deficiencies of the hiring speak for themselves. So it's, as Trump would say, it's common sense. And I wish people would pay attention to that. Hey, Jeff, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nick. Look, I agree with you on every count. I completely agree with you. And look, I'm sorry, but my blood is boiling over this because there's 67 people dead. That should not, there's no need for this. And in the end, what do they die for? So liberals can feel good about themselves? No, really. So they can stand back and say, yeah, even people with epilepsy now can be air traffic controllers. Even people with severe psychiatric problems or severe intellectual disabilities, yeah, you can be an air traffic controller too. You know, as Sandy said to me in our pre-show meeting, you know, she says, Sandy has dyslexia. She goes, I can't be a surgeon. I mean, I'm just sorry. There's people have certain conditions that prevent them from doing certain occupations. That's just life. I'm sorry. Well, it's not fair. Well, I'm sorry. Life is not fair. I don't know what else to tell you. And as Sandy said, look, you don't want me operating on your heart because I'm dyslexic. Do you understand? That's why I can't, certain professions, you know, I wanted to be a surgeon, but I can't. I got to do something else. And, you know, she's a lawyer, she's a radio show producer, you know, and so what I'm saying is, you know, the expression, life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. That's life. So, you know, I'm sorry, you know, I'm blind. Well, you can't be an eye doctor. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's just life. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean you're an inferior person. It just means for certain occupations and certain jobs, no. The answer is no. Here, I want to be, you know, let's say, Kuhner man, you want to be a disc jockey. You know, I love horses. I want to ride horses. I want to ride horses competitively. Well, are you like 4'9", 4'10", and about 80 pounds? Well, no, I'm 6'3.5" and 260. Well, buddy, I don't care if you're 6'3" and 200, 180. I don't care if you starve yourself. You're too big. You're too tall. Period. You want to be a competitive horse jockey? You got to be short and thin. Period. That's the qualification. I'm sorry, man. Live with it. And now it's gotten to the point, I mean, this is absurd. I mean, this is a spoof. This is out of Pol Pot's Cambodia. Really, where you're like, so hold on. People with severe, this is literally from the FAA's website, people with severe intellectual disability, people with severe psychiatric problems, they've lost limbs. They suffer from epilepsy, seizures, like a holy mackerel. And you say, and we're aggressively targeting them. Like, in other words, we want them and we want them bad. Only Pete Buttigieg, only Joe Biden, only a crazy woke liberal. And they put it up on the FAA's website. They're playing with our lives. And they're doing it in medical schools. Doctors tell me this all the time. They go, Jeff, you don't understand. They are dropping standards and dropping standards and dropping standards in the name of diversity because they got to hit quotas. And I'm telling you, they go, we're turning out many doctors that are not qualified and people are going to get killed. And you see it across the board. It's in the military, it's in fire departments, police departments, and now air traffic controllers and pilots. May God help us. 8:19 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Bob in New Hampshire. Thanks for holding, Bob, and welcome.
Kuhner, hi, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you, Bob?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm a first-time caller, but a long-time listener.
Welcome, Bob.
And thank you. Just a little background on myself. I'm a 35-year Army officer, a Black Hawk pilot for 30 years, and also the commander of the Fort Belvoir unit that had the crash. An ex-commander.
Okay.
Now, it's dated. It was 20 years ago, but I was the commander of that unit. And I have flown that route multiple times, hundreds of times, day and night. And it's a very difficult flight. And there are a number of factors, I think, and I don't want to, armchair this thing on why it happened or what happened. And I'm sure that everything will come out on it. It's too early to tell, but I think it was a combination of both the pilots and the Black Hawk and also the air traffic control. So it's not just one side. What do they have to look at? Well, first off, what was the altitude of the Black Hawk? The altitude that you're supposed to fly that route is 200 feet and no higher than that. And the reason why is because the approaching aircraft, because they do come in at different angles. There's 3 approaches there. So the Black Hawks would go underneath the actual landing traffic. So they try to keep that separation with that 200 feet. So were they above that altitude? I don't know. And the air traffic controllers would be able to see that on their scope. The city lights in the background. So at night, when you're flying in the city, you can't distinguish between city lights and aircraft lights in the air if you're at the same level. It's almost impossible because you got so many lights in the background. So even if they're moving, you can't see them. It's just they get washed out by the city lights. Other factor is the crew could have been potentially on night vision goggles. My understanding is that the crew was out on a training flight. Well, the training flight was an annual evaluation from my understanding. So every year a pilot gets evaluated, and so that was an evaluation flight. So one of those parts that he gets evaluated on is night vision goggle flights. And so potentially the crew was under night vision goggles. I don't know that, but there is a potential that they were. And if that's the case, it even adds that much more to the washout in the background from the city lights.
Bob, I'm very happy you mentioned that because I was going to ask you about that. A lot of people have been texting the Kuhner man, emailing me, saying, Jeff, the night vision goggles, they probably played some kind of a role in this. What is it about having night vision goggles if you're in a Black Hawk? Is it what, you can't see as well because of the lights? Do the lights blind you a little bit? Like, why is that an issue? I'm just curious, Bob.
Well, night vision goggles, when I started flying as a young lieutenant, we were one of the first guys to get night vision qualified. And the example they used to use during that training was put 2 toilet paper tubes up against your eyes and look through them. What do you see? You have a very limited field of view through those toilet paper tubes. And so that's what's happening in night vision goggles. You have a very limited peripheral vision. So you got to keep your head constantly scanning to see where you're at, what's going on, and so forth.
Okay. So maybe that inhibited them from seeing the plane as it was on a glide path, correct?
Potentially. Again, did they have them on? When I flew in D.C., we had them on our helmet, and we would flip them up, flip them down. You could do it over like a 1 second period. And so I personally didn't fly with them on in the city. Outside the city, I did, but inside the city, I would not because the city lights would sort of kind of amplify the lights inside the goggles. So you wanted to use just regular, vision. But I don't know if they're getting evaluated. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but that could have been a factor. The other thing was, which I asked several friends of mine that were also there, and I said, do you ever remember aircraft taking off and landing opposing each other? And I don't remember that. But when you watch the video, you have an aircraft taking off,
towards the landing aircraft. And so when the air traffic controller asks the pilot, which is common, they do it all the time, do you have visual contact? And you say, Roger, visual contact. That relieves the responsibility of the air traffic controller to the pilot. And so at that point, the pilot assumes separation responsibility. Now, the question becomes, which aircraft or what did he see?
Exactly.
Did he see the taking off aircraft? Which I think he did, because you got these bright lights from the landing lights of the aircraft, and they can see that. It was out their right door. Versus the aircraft landing was at the same altitude or close to the same altitude, and they're washed out. Any lights of it, you don't see the landing lights. You see nothing except maybe a position light, and that's being washed out by the background of the city. So I think the pilots acknowledged that they had the aircraft, but it was the aircraft that was taking off.
I agree. Bob, I completely agree. I mean, look, we'll have to wait for the final report, and all the evidence. But what you just laid out, by the way, so articulately and so simply and so clearly from obviously your vast, impressive experience, I think you put the picture together beautifully. I think that's pretty much exactly what happened. So when they said, I have visual, so air traffic controller says, okay, they're good. But he was looking at the wrong plane. And I think that was the fatal error. And now 67 people are dead. Bob, thank you for your service. And please don't be a stranger. Call again. 8:31 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, we've got several lines open. So if you want to weigh in, now's your chance. 617-266-6868 is the number. I'd like to take as many calls as possible. I want to ask all of you, just generally, how do you feel about air travel in general? Are you nervous when you fly? Do you feel that there's just too much congestion, air traffic to begin with, in the air, in the skies? Do you have confidence in pilots? Do you have confidence in air traffic controllers? Do you find it a pleasant experience to fly? I've got to tell you, ever since 9/11, frankly, so this is what are we talking now, 24 years? I don't like to fly. And if I can avoid flying, I will. Not so much because I'm, concerned about the pilots or the air traffic controllers, although after what I saw on the FAA's website, now, Trump is fixing it. But, I definitely wouldn't have flown the last 4 years had I known that this was their aggressive diversity hiring program. So, but let that go, as I like to say. I don't like the long lines. I don't like the way you're treated by the airlines. The congestion, the lack. Travel used to be fun. It used to be comfortable. I used to enjoy looking forward to flying. It used to be a real treat to fly. Now you're lucky if you get a bag of pretzels and, a cup of water. The seats are small. You feel like you're flying in a sardine can. Frankly, many of the flight attendants, not all, there's some excellent ones, but many of the flight attendants are, they're rude, they're nasty, and a lot of the passengers are oftentimes rude and inconsiderate. It's just not a fun experience anymore. I'm just going to be honest with you. So if I can avoid it, and it takes very long. It takes long to get to the airport. It takes long to get through TSA. It takes long to board a plane. Just the whole process. So I'll give you an example. If I want to visit family up in Canada, in Montreal, technically it's a 45-minute flight. Boston, Montreal, basically you go up and you go down. By the time I get to Logan and get through Logan and wait to board the plane and, you sit on that thing and my rear end is killing me within 20 minutes because the seats are so freaking hard and my knees are like sore because I have no leg room. And then the guy in front of me has to pull back his seat. I don't know why. Can't you see I'm a big guy? Like, be a little considerate. But no, he's got to pull it back even more. And he's like, then he's sleeping, he's snoring. You know? And I'm like, basically blank me. And so my knees are killing me, my rear end is killing me, my back is killing me. And I'm like, who needs this? So I will drive. I'll take Grace and the kids. It's about a 5-6 hour drive. Nice and comfortable in my car, my SUV actually. And, you tank up, you stop for a break, you grab some gas, get a little bit of food, keep going. It's actually a much more pleasant experience. So, yeah, I do try to avoid flying as much as I can. But in the wake of this, are you more reluctant to fly? Do you feel that flying has become dangerous? And should we be pushing diversity, equity, and inclusion when it comes to pilots, flight attendants, crew, staff, and air traffic controllers? To me, I think it's literally insane. It is beyond reckless and irresponsible. But that's me. I want to hear from you. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, just super quick. You need to hear this, okay? There was a Inspector General's report on Pete Buttigieg's FAA in June 2023. So about 2 years ago. Just actually a year and a half ago. So this is what Biden's own Inspector General said about the FAA under Pete Buttigieg. Now, you tell me if Trump is to blame or Buttigieg is to blame. Quote, straight from the report, 77% of critical facilities staffed below threshold. In other words, air traffic control, towers. 77% of critical facilities at major airports staffed below threshold. Furthermore, that Buttigieg's FAA lacks a plan to address staffing challenges. That's a nice way of saying chronic shortages of air traffic controllers, posing a risk to continuity of air traffic operations. FAA cannot ensure it will successfully train enough controllers in the short term. Meaning, because they were so aggressively going for, we need somebody that's intellectually disabled. Find me an epileptic. I need an epileptic. Get me people with mental problems, psychiatric problems. Come on. I need dwarfs. Get me dwarfs. The shorter, the better. Just get them in there. Well, what about all these other competent people that are acing the test? Well, what are they, white? White men? What the hell with them? We don't need that. That's not diversity. That's why there was a chronic shortage. And that's why they couldn't fill it. Now, just like the LA wildfires, again, where you had DEI, another fatal, deadly example of deadly incompetence. Mismanagement. And this is exactly what's wrong. Democrats are obsessed with these insane woke policies. Really, these kind of fringe ideological obsessions. Than with just basic competence and governing responsibilities. Just do your job, man. It's really not that difficult. Hire the best people, staff the best people, whatever color, creed, gender, who they sleep with, who they don't sleep with. Who cares? 617-266-6868. Agree, disagree. Jeff in Quincy. Thanks for holding, Jeff, and welcome.
Hey, how are you, Jeff? So you kind of jumped on it with the IG report, but Pete Buttigieg is blaming Republicans for this when they're slow rolling all of Trump's nominees.
Oh, that's a great point.
Like, they're slow walking every one of them.
Oh, you're dead on. Oh, you're absolutely dead on. And notice, just to bounce off of what you're saying, Jeff, and I promise I'll give you all the time in the world. Now, this is what these dumb liberals are now saying. And I attacked that argument yesterday on X. Now they're saying Trump is to blame for what happened. Well, why? Because he imposed, they say, a federal hiring freeze. Really? Okay. And they say, yeah. And he's pushing for all of these buyouts of federal government employees. That's why there's a shortage of air traffic controllers. So you know why there wasn't enough staff and air traffic controllers at Reagan National? Blame Trump. He's making us all less safe. Except there's a problem. The federal buyouts haven't taken place yet. They haven't occurred. The deadline is still, what is it, a week away or 2 weeks away? So there was no hiring freeze. No one got bought out. No one, and by the way, the buyouts are for federal government employees who refuse to come back to the office. These are people who've been working from home since the pandemic. It's been 4 years now. And Trump is saying, hey, look, man, we're paying you a ton of cash, ton of money, taxpayer money. Get your ass to the office. So how can an air traffic controller, call me nuts, how can they do their job from their home? They've got to be in the tower. They've got to be there at the airport. So they've been caught in another massive, massive lie. So they're trying to blame this on Trump when it goes right back to your point, Jeff. Who's preventing him from getting his people staffed and getting his people to fill these positions? They are. Who's blocking his nominees? They are. Who's trying to prevent him from purging the federal bureaucracy and hiring nothing but the most talented merit-based people? They are. Who was the one that drove the FAA into the ground? They did. And now they're trying to pass the buck off to Trump? Jeff, final word to you.
My final word is I have two things. First thing is you couldn't even hire FAA staff and train them in the week he's been in office. Second of all is when you ask a federal worker, are they working hard? They said, no, I'm hardly working.
Jeff, drop the mic. I mean, even if you accept all their premises, which is, they're lying. So tell me, you're going to hire and train someone in less than a week? Right. Only a liberal can be that detached from reality. More next. 8:49 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, this is from a very respected pilot who texted me, Jeff, the airliner, the American Airlines flight, was on the correct flight plan. Unfortunately, it was the Black Hawk that hit the airliner. And he says, we'll know a lot more when the black boxes and the radar tapes are going to show exactly the flight paths and the altitudes of both aircraft. So we're going to find out more, obviously. But why were they at the same elevation? That's key. Same altitude. That's why it happened. In other words, if the plane was slightly higher or the helicopter was slightly lower or what, none of this would have happened. So, and that was Trump's point yesterday at the press conference. So there was a gigantic screw up. And I think what most of you are concluding, and I think it's, probably the right one, little bit of pilot error, a little bit of air traffic control error. Maybe a mixture of both. But we shall see. 617-266-6868 is the number. David in Brookline. Thanks for holding, David. And welcome.
Good morning from the People's Republic. To Bill in Sudbury, when there have been a couple of shootings, terrible, tragic shootings, the bodies weren't, and I believe one of them was in a school, if I recall, when that transgender that they didn't identify, but the bodies weren't cold yet, and they were railing anyone they could get, including the former so-called president, about gun control, wrongly about gun control. So don't be hypocritical now when President Trump rightly is pointing out in his own way, as well as being very sympathetic and empathetic, a very major underlying problem in our country, Jeff. And let me just add this. Have you noticed, Jeff, in the last several years, I've thought about this, daily activities have become more difficult and almost nothing works like it used to work. You could pick up the phone and try to call and get customer service at a utility company. You'll be waiting all day, et cetera, et cetera. Have you noticed that things have not run well? And and I think you had an earlier caller that used the word systemic. You don't wake up one morning and just have a heart attack. It's from several years or more of not doing the right thing. So to these lunatics and these people that are completely off the rail or lack common sense, that want to point to President Trump, who's been in office for 12 days. I mean, come on. It has to be a belief in unreality. As President Trump says, we need a revolution of common sense. Let me ask you a question, Jeff. If you owned an NBA team, and I don't mean to be mean, I actually couldn't believe what I was hearing yesterday about dwarfs and so forth. Do you want an NBA team with dwarfs? Then why would I want air traffic controllers or pilots? I mean, no offense, Jeff, but common sense.
Well, yeah, and look, to be honest, even on the dwarf issue, you can raise the seat. That's fine. But to me, what's unforgivable, and I agree with you. Look, you have an NBA is an obvious, example, but look, there are some positions you need a certain minimum height requirement. I'm sorry, that's just life, okay? But let's leave the dwarf thing. You're right, but let's just leave the dwarf thing on the side. You want me to get someone who's, quote, I'll quote from the actual FAA, severe intellectual disability? Severely intellectually disabled to be an air traffic controller? Are you nuts? I'm sorry, but that's like saying I want someone who's severely intellectually disabled to be a brain surgeon. Are you normal? Really, are you normal? Or serious psychiatric or mental problems. Now, again, look, I know people battle mental health. Everybody's so touchy. We're not talking about slight depression. We're not talking about, in other words, if I'm schizophrenic, okay, I got schizophrenia. You want me to be a pilot? Are you normal? You want me to be an air traffic controller? Are you normal? And this was Trump's point yesterday. He's looking around the room at all these, woke, liberal, left-wing, frankly crazy media. And he's like, do you know the pressure these air traffic controllers are under? I mean, I played the cut earlier. And this is true, by the way. So much pressure that many of them die earlier. Heart attacks, strokes, because there's just so much it's constant pressure. Obviously, people's lives, every time you make a decision, hundreds of people's lives are in your hands. I'll bet you right now, the air traffic controller, I do feel sorry for that person right now who was responsible for that flight. I bet that person it's eating them up on the inside. I bet they're going over and over and over. My God, am I to blame? Oh my God, should I have done this? What if I had done this? It's an immense responsibility. And Trump says, you think it's one plane an hour? There's 40, 50, 60 planes. They're flying in left, right, and center, especially at Reagan. You need people, as he put it, at the top of their game. People with serious intellectual talent and versatility who can handle tremendous psychological, emotional pressure. Again, we're not talking about a 25, and nothing wrong with being an administrative assistant. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not talking about a $25,000 a year, paper pusher. Seriously. Look, a lot of people can't even do a job at McDonald's. No, really. It's just because, the rush hour, the lunch, the dinner. Come on, let's go. We got Big Mac orders are flying. Fries. Come on, let's go. Those chicken McNuggets. We got them. Let's go. We got customers waiting. Never mind air traffic control. So Trump is looking around in utter disbelief. And again, he kept saying, he goes, I'm not even talking about race and gender. Forget that for a second. And he goes, epilepsy, psychiatric disability, intellectual disability. He goes, this is insane. Basically what he's saying is this is criminal. And he says no, and that's why he signed an executive order. David, I want to play this. I want to get your reaction. He literally signed the executive order yesterday. This was so impressive. He comforts the nation. He calms everybody. He reassures a shaken public. And then he says this culture of DEI is over. Do you understand? It's over. Okay? So we're going to have the best pilots, best air traffic controllers, best ground crew. It's going to be the best. And it's going to be hired strictly on merit. The days of Biden and Obama and DEI are over. Then he goes over to the White House. And to show you, it's not just words. In 2 hours, roll cut 78. Mike.
We're ensuring that people hired within the FAA, in keeping with your memorandum of January 21st, are only the most outstanding, capable people for the jobs that they're being hired into.
In other words, competence.
Yes, sir. Elevating competence over everything else instead of the DEI policies that were pursued by the Biden administration.
I think everyone understands that.
Okay, you see the pen? You can hear it? He just signed an executive order. Bang. FAA, competence above everything else. You promote competence. You hire competence. You train competence. That's it. That's it. And I'm sure there's character. Obviously, can you take pressure? Can you work in a very stressful situation? Can you multitask? That's very important. Very, very important. Now, I'm sorry, but I don't know. Am I missing something? That's like saying the sky is blue. Just why Trump's looking around. This is just common sense. It's like 2 + 2 = 4. And you're looking at me like I have 8 heads? David, I got to ask you point blank. Are you worried about flying? Seriously. Are you concerned about the safety of the skies? And ultimately, do Biden and Buttigieg have blood on their hands? 67 people are dead. In some way, shape, or form, do they bear at least some responsibility for what happened? What say you?
I love the question. I want to answer it this way. Yes, I've thought about that for the last several years. I said, like many people, when is this terrible thing going to happen? At the airport, you're treated like cattle. The last two things I want to say, Jeff, to the same point. Buttigieg tweeted out yesterday, he was trying to retort President Trump. We haven't had any fatalities under us, and we did a great job. Well, if termites are eating your foundation away, the house doesn't fall down on day one. If the house falls down after the termites eat through the foundation. And finally, Jeff, to all the things you said earlier about, well, how could they think this? How could they think that it's good to have a severely psychologically impaired person in charge of air traffic control? What's the obvious answer? Look who they put in as president.
David, touche. I gotta say, touche. I don't mean to be insensitive. I mean, 67 people are dead. Either you laugh or you cry, but touche. David, thank you very much for that call. Look, again, okay? Look up the story, please. And there's others. I'm just citing you one. New York Post, Emma Colton is the author, the reporter, and it was published January 14th, 2024. So over a year ago. Okay? Read to you the headline. Quote, this is the headline. FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with, quote, severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. And they say in particular, on the FAA's own website, they are actively recruiting workers under a new diversity and inclusion hiring initiative. And this is exactly now what the New York Post quotes from the FAA. So, Jeff, what is this new diversity hiring initiative? Quote, targeted disabilities. In other words, these are the people they want to hire. Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. So these are the people we really want. Quote, according to the FAA's website, quote, they include hearing disabilities, vision disabilities, missing extremities. Like, you're missing hands, you're missing feet. Like you're missing body parts. Partial paralysis. Complete paralysis. I'm going to have a pilot that's completely paralyzed? I'm sorry. I'm going to have an air traffic controller that's complete. I'm sorry. I mean, I feel very sorry if you're completely paralyzed. Really? I don't want to seem insensitive. But we're going to be aggressively hiring air traffic controllers who are paralyzed from head to toe? Epilepsy. They get seizures. Severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism. And I'm the crazy one. 617-266-6868. And we're wondering why, under Buttigieg, chronic shortage of air traffic controllers the whole time, the whole 4 years. Plane parts, remember that? Cockpits, just doors getting blown open in the middle of a flight, falling from the sky. Remember that? Now, by the way, 3,000 super qualified white males under Buttigieg their applications were rejected. Scored 100% on all the tests, all the scores, everything. 100%, not qualified, super qualified. But because of this diversity hiring initiative, they were like, no, sorry, no. That's why there was a staffing shortage. They had people that could have filled all those positions. They didn't want to fill them with the best. Now, the problem is, how do you get someone with severe intellectual disability or psychiatric disability or partial paralysis? How do we get them in? It's hard to get them in. And so they try, and they try, and they try, and they try. And that's why there are more positions unfilled and more positions unfilled. And I'll go back to the Washington Times story I cited earlier. That now, because there were such shortages, you had to have less people, air traffic controllers, not enough. But you need, the plane traffic doesn't stop. As I said, 40,000 flights a day, 3 million Americans flying every day. More people are flying now than ever. So what do? The current air traffic controllers, you got to work longer hours. You got to work mandatory, whether you like it or not. You're working weekends. You're working 7 days a week. You're working 14 hours a day. So what began? And I suspect, I don't know, I'm speculating, but I suspect that air traffic controller who may have made a mistake on that flight, remember, there was supposed to be two people. One tracking the plane, one tracking the helicopter. Nope, it was one tracking both. I bet that person's probably working 80, 90, 100 hours a week. I'm almost positive. And probably burnt out. And that's how mistakes make. Mistakes are always made. Often because lack of sleep, too much. I always say this. You want to perform at your best, sleep. Sleep. After a while, it catches up to you. No, you may think you're Superman. You're not. We have an exhausted, overworked air traffic and understaffed air traffic control system. Trump's only been in office 1 week. And now with this new executive order, we're going to hire nothing but the best. 617-266-6868. Heather in Rockland. Thanks for holding, Heather, and welcome.
Hi, Jeffrey. Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
I wanted to answer your question. I don't love flying. However, I do like to travel, so I find it is the necessary evil. With that being said, am I afraid to fly? Not necessarily, because I agree with what you said before. I forget how you said it, but basically the statistics, of a plane crash are so low. You're more apt to get in a car accident than a plane crash. But so, with all that being said, I just find, and I find it more since COVID. I find that traveling, air travel, is a pain in the butt because of all the hassles you have to deal with at the airport. And I feel like it's been more, you said since 9/11, which it probably has been, but I feel it's exacerbated since COVID. And I feel like that they probably, obviously they don't have the right staff. They don't have enough staff with all these the flights being delayed and people being stranded at airports with flights being delayed. And it's just one thing after another you hear on the news about air travel. The airlines being very, I feel like greedy. I mean, it's ridiculous that you have to pay, I feel like it's ridiculous that you have to pay a fee for luggage, to check your bag. I mean, that's just totally ridiculous to me. It's just greed after greed after greed. It's like money grabbing to me. And it's annoying that on in itself. And I feel, this thing with the DEI thing, I'm wondering if it's a little bit of it. I don't know if this makes sense, but it just popped into my head. If they use the DEI hiring as another way of we'll just hire people that are less qualified so we don't have to pay them as much. It goes back down to the greed. I could be wrong, but I mean, there's definitely careers that I would love to do that I know I could never do. I mean, 2 careers, I wouldn't want to do them, but just as an example, say I could never be a nurse or a teacher. I have the utmost respect for those two professions, but those are 2 jobs I could never do. You know what I mean? I feel like you got to know your limitations. Everybody has limitations. Not everybody can be president of the United States. Not everybody can be an actress or, a famous singer or, everybody has a gift, but it may not be necessarily what you want to do. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, you're dead on. No, really, look, how many people, the term, a cruise ship singer, right? You go on these cruise ships. Oh, they can't sing. Oh, are they bad? They're just bad, but they want to sing and say, oh, okay, well, we'll pay you nothing and just get on the boat and sing. Look, how many people want to sing, would love to sing? They just don't have the voice. That's just sorry. That's just life. Really, not that I ever cared to do this, okay? But for example, I could never be a model. No, really, honestly. Never mind my weight and all that. I work out 7 days a week. I work out 3 hours a day. I watch my diet. I'm just not naturally good looking. I'm not saying I'm ugly, but I'm not good looking. There are just some people you say, no, they got it. They're photogenic. The way their face is, the way their body is, they just are naturally physically attractive, beautiful, handsome people. That's why they're on the covers of, magazines and they model. And I'm sorry. Nothing doesn't mean you're a bad person or you're a less than. It's just, it's not for you. I'm sorry. You just can't do it. Here, my wonderful nephew loves football, played high school football, worked out like a demon, pumped weights 3-4 hours a day, practice after practice. He's just not big enough. He's not big enough. He's not fast enough. He's not athletic enough to make it to the college level. Never mind the pros. Great kid. I love him. He's going to go into law enforcement, I believe. I think he's going to have a very good career in law enforcement. His dream was to play in the NFL. He just doesn't have it. Doesn't have the talent. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just some people, you just can't do it. Sorry, you're not big enough, you're not strong enough, you're not fast enough. That's life. It's okay. Not everybody has to be in the NFL. But not with these moonbats. So, now they want paralyzed blind people as pilots. 9:18 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Frank in Bedford. Thanks for holding, Frank, and welcome.
All right, Jeff, this just came over the wire. I got to pull over. The helicopter pilot, Josh Ellis, flew into the plane, was a man who wanted to be a woman. This man participated in an interview a day before the crash. In the interview, he voiced his dislike for the termination of DEI policies. Identified as Chief Warrant Officer, CW2, John Ellis, served in the Virginia National Guard for 15 years. The transitional while serving as a pilot. It's a 50-50, it's an inside job.
Well, you know, Frank, I saw that story earlier, and I don't know if that's been corroborated yet, Frank. I know a couple of bloggers have gone with it. I know some podcasters have, but the way I'm reading it, this is how it's being described, is that there's a rumor that this person was transgender. So I don't know, Frank. You may be right. Please don't get me wrong. But until I have more hard evidence, I can't corroborate that. That's why I didn't mention it. So we'll have to wait and see. Look, if it is it wasn't that pilot. Okay, so Sandy says, yeah, it was a rumor that person was not one of the 3 crew members on board of the Black Hawk helicopter. So that's why I said I didn't want to run with it because it wasn't corroborated. But look, Frank, let's just say this. If they're trying to cover it up, if there is I'm not saying there is, but if they're trying to cover it up, they're not going to get away with it. It's going to come out. Believe me, Trump's going to want the information to come out. Hegseth is going to want the information to come out. Sean Duffy, the new transportation secretary, is going to want the information to come out. So they won't be able, if it is true, they won't be able to cover it up. But no, the reason why, Frank, I didn't mention it was they kept saying, you know, that's the rumor, that's the rumor, that's the rumor. And I'm like, I respect this audience too much. Yeah, the pilot is still alive. No, I understand. This Joe Ellis is still alive. So it appears to have been a rumor. I'm just explaining my thinking, 4 hours ago, right? It was hot on social media about 4 hours ago. And I'm like, I don't want to ever peddle rumors to this audience. I mean, I'll tell you if I'm speculating, right? I'm saying, hey, look, like we're in the living room. Here's what I think. But I don't want to run with something and say it's true and we don't know it's true. I would never do that to you. 617-266-6868 is the number. Gordon in Vermont. Thanks for holding, Gordon, and welcome.
Good morning, Jeff.
Hi, Gordon.
I can't help thinking of some science fiction I read years ago that this modern age seems to have used as a script. Like one of them is a story by C.M. Kornbluth, short story, same name, maybe the grandfather of the head of MIT, but it was called The Marching Morons. And it was exactly about this, where people were running stuff that they were not competent to do, and just things are crashing, coming apart, blowing up. And I think that what's happening, it's a kind of terrorism, really, promoting people who are incompetent to do things that absolutely require competence. and just destroying this country from within by causing things to just go wrong in such a massive scale. And that's what it looks like to me.
Oh, I agree. Gordon, I completely agree. And just to maybe throw another quick log on the fire, and I want to get your take on this, Gordon. Yes. David in Brookline, one of our previous callers, I thought made a really interesting point where he said, Jeff, have you noticed, especially in the last couple of years, I don't know if it's COVID, whatever it is, DEI, this woke virus that's infecting so much of our society, but not just airplanes, not just, transportation, but but so much doesn't seem to work as well anymore. And David said, you call customer service. And I remember, look, I got to tell you, 30 years ago, when I first came to the United States as a graduate student at Ohio University, I couldn't believe how good the customer service was. It was incredible. Anything, it doesn't matter. You call, maybe a minute, 30 seconds you wait, and then, hi, can I help you? And with a big smile. Now, he's right. You wait forever. Nobody cares. Now, I'm not just saying, calling an 800 number. McDonald's. Couple times now, I've gone, and it's a good McDonald's. You're waiting and waiting, long lines, waiting, for the drive-through. And you're like, I don't have half an hour. Like, this used to never happen. So what I'm saying is, healthcare. I remember when I first came, oh my God, how quickly you got seen and the quality service you received. Now, I go to the doctor's office, I'm waiting 3, 4, even sometimes 5 hours. And what they also do is they see you, but they don't see you. In other words, they sit you down and and then you're just waiting in a chair inside the doctor's office. And the doctor's in a different office. So it's almost like, well, let's just get him out of the waiting room and then stick him in, and then, and he'll wait there another half an hour. So I've noticed overall that just the quality of things, the quality of service, just overall has gone down. Gordon, am I imagining things, or do you agree or disagree?
Absolutely. This is what I've been seeing. I am now officially old because I'm like 71 now, which is amazing to me. I don't think it's possible. My hair hasn't even all turned white. But I remember a lot of things going back to the days when competence was king. You had to be competent to do stuff. And now it seems like the whole idea of diversity is we must lower the standards for some, supposedly to be fair to people, but I think it's being done on purpose to destroy this country because you have incompetent people doing important, serious work. I don't know who sponsors it, but our education system, the Chinese, the communists, all kinds of just bad actors who hate America and they want to see it destroyed. And this is how they do it, by like termites. They can't just frontal attack. They just hollow everything out till it collapses. Like a rotten house.
Gordon, I love the analogy. I think it's a brilliant analogy. And you're talking at the highest levels. I agree with you. I think it's education. I think part of it is just our horrible education system. Have you seen some of the people that work drive-thru at McDonald's now? Like, holy mackerel. Like, not the sharpest bulb, I'll tell you this. No, really. It's like, I asked for 2 Big Macs and a large fry. Really? Yes. Hello. 9:31 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, we're going to go back, obviously, to the jammed phone lines. But first, joining us now, as she always does at this time, she is the co-founder, CEO, president of Kelly Financial Services. And yes, that is her wonderful name. I love her name, Kelly. Kelly, how are you?
Good morning, Jeff. I am good. Retirement is a time for new beginnings, and for many, that means downsizing. But before you make a move, have you thought about how it fits into your financial future? Downsizing isn't just about selling your home. It's about making smart financial decisions that protect your retirement income and lifestyle. Our Kelly advisors can help you navigate through the downsizing process with confidence. They'll ensure you have the best tax strategy in place in order to maximize the proceeds from selling your home. We also have a free investor guide called Your Retirement Income Planning Checklist, which includes ways to develop a housing plan. For the guide or for a free consultation with a Kelly advisor, give us a call or email kelly@kellyfinancial.org. Jeff, I will continue this conversation with our Kelly advisors tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. on Safe Money Strategies Radio. Do tune in or go to our website for our radio rewind. Jeff, have a wonderful weekend. My best to Grace and the kiddos. And him too.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Have a wonderful weekend. All the best to you and everyone at Kelly Financial. Again, for a free copy of their guide or for a free retirement consultation, call 888-800-1881, 888-800-1881, or if you prefer, you can email Kelly herself, kelly@kellyfinancial.org, kelly@kellyfinancial.org. Okay, just super quick. I don't want to take too much time on this, but, Mike was chiming in while we were off air. He goes, Jeff, you got to see the Wendy's near my house. He goes, I think it's the worst. I go, really? So apparently Mike tells me that, Mike, what do you get? You get like the super cheeseburger? Is that what you get, Mike? The dollar cheeseburger? That's it? All right, so he gets the dollar cheeseburger with the nuggets, a small fry, and say a little drink. And he says, first of all, he's got to wait half an hour just to get to the takeout window. He goes, Jeff, legit, half an hour. And then, what do they give me? A number 4 and a number 7. And I'm like, I didn't order all of this. They keep getting the order wrong. Now, I'm starting to see it at my local, it's a couple times now. Long wait, 20, 25, 30 minutes, and they're always getting the order wrong. So that's just a little, I don't know. Now, Jack messaged me on Messenger, and he said, Jeff, have you noticed 90% of the time you hire someone to do the job, you always have to ask them to come back because they didn't quite do it the right way. Now, Grace hired someone to do a paint job. Guess what? Horrible job. She couldn't believe it. She goes, it was horrible. Come back. You got to redo this. This is horrible. And Jack was saying, Jeff, it's those phones, especially younger people today, but just in general, they're always got their face in front of that phone. And Jack believes, education system, the overall dumbing down of America. And I'm sorry, but I agree with him. We're starting to live with the consequences of this. 617-266-6868. That's why Trump is 1,000% correct. You've got to restore competence as king. Competence, achievement, excellence, merit. Those are the values that made America great. Those are the values that are going to make us great again. Bill in New Hampshire. Thanks for holding, Bill, and welcome.
Yeah, Jeff, first-time caller here, but pilot for the past 10 years, professional pilot. And,
welcome. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Also a current active flight instructor, and I got caught about half the show, so not sure if you guys have talked about this quite yet, but if you look at the jet that was ahead of the American Eagle that crashed, right?
Yes.
So they're coming in for one runway 1. It's a longer runway at Washington. Now, that jet out ahead of the plane that crashed was asked if he could do that same sidestep maneuver over the runway 33, a shorter runway. He said he was unable. Now, this controller, that was the controller's mistake all day. He has his sequence completely messed up. Then he asks the poor American Eagle behind him, who ends up crashing, obviously, into the helicopter, and he gives him the wins, and he says, are you able to accept runway 33? Now, if you see in the tape, the American Eagle that crashed, it's about 20 seconds before he finally responds, and he says yes. Now, he is doing that to help out the controller and to cover for the controller's mistake. That controller made a mistake. His sequence, if you look at the radar, which is all out there on YouTube now, it's all messed up. So here he is doing him a favor. Now, not only did that controller not point out the traffic properly, as you were discussing earlier, to the helicopter, he also put that American Eagle right into a helicopter corridor that is flown all the time. You would expect helicopters to be there. He knows he has a helicopter coming, and he still turns him into that corridor. It's criminal. It's absolutely criminal, Jeff.
Bill, look, as an experienced, and obviously you really know what you're talking about, as an experienced pilot, now I know you're not an air traffic controller, I understand, but what is your theory on why that air traffic controller made that fatal mistake? Is it DEI? Is it overwork and exhaustion and understaffed? Is it, as it's now coming out, he was combining two jobs. They were supposed to have two people. They only had one. He was monitoring both helicopter and the plane traffic, and he couldn't do it. He took his eye off the ball, or he made a mistake. What do you think the culprit is, if you were to guess, Bill?
Jeff, I'd say absolutely 100% all of the above. All of the above, all day. It's even if he was the best controller in the world, I have my doubts at that. He's still within an agency culture where it affects everybody. It's a top-down problem where everyone's on forced overtime, everybody's overworked, everybody's understaffed, so we all feel the effects. Do I think DEI? Absolutely, Bill. Do I think some of the conspiracy theories that have come out about this being intentional with the helicopter? Absolutely not. The helicopter was 100 feet high. That is a screw-up. It's a bad one. It's so he gets an assist in the fault here. But the egregious mistake is, why would that controller make that airplane change runways, knowing he had a helicopter coming right up? It's called Helicopter Corridor 2, and the maximum altitude is 200 feet. You can check me out on that one. It's all the charts are online. And he knows he's there. He turns him right into it, but the egregious part is this was the controller's mistake, and he's sitting there playing catch-up, trying to get these guys to sidestep so he can get better spacing. He's trying to use that other runway because he's allowed them to all get too close. I mean, this air traffic control error all day, every day.
Bill, dynamite call. Bill, this is your first time calling?
First time calling.
Bill, please, don't be a stranger. Call again, my friend. What a call. Bill, again, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. 6-1, what'd I tell you, huh? Best audience in the business. 617-266-6868. John in New Hampshire. Thanks for holding, John, and welcome.
Hey, Jeff. Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
My original to say is to thank you guys. 3 weeks ago, I called in. My brother was in the Pacific Palisades during that fire. Do you remember that call?
Yes, I remember that call, John.
Yeah. His house and 28 houses around him all survived. Yet his father-in-law house was burnt to the ground, but he had a forethought to take his Heisman Trophy and a few other things and head to Arizona to a friend's place. So he lost his house, but he got some of his most valuable thing, and nobody died. So that worked out great.
Knock on wood. That's all that matters.
Well, saying that. Secondly, you had a caller about the transsexual. That has not been confirmed, but my wife just called and told me that she says she's around walking. She's alive and fine. So she was not on that flight on the helicopter. But in regards to
John,
DEI,
that's what Sandy said in my ear as well. That they're saying, no, she didn't perish in that flight. That she's alive. You can see her. So, and to be fair, the people that first were talking about it said it's a rumor. And they said, look, there's a rumor that she was on the plane. And the moment I hear a rumor, I'm like, I'm not going to go with it on the air. I mean, I have too much respect for this audience. But, and John, please go ahead. Finish your last point.
Yeah, the DEI. I could not agree more that we head back to a meritocracy-based society. They have destroyed so much. And listen, you guys have been talking about you can't even get served at McDonald's.
Yeah, you're right. No, really, you can't even get served at McDonald's. Like, that's how badly it's infected so much of our country and our culture. Agree, disagree? John, thank you very much for that call. Okay, I want to take as many calls as possible on the other side. 617-266-6868. 948 on the Greg WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Mel in Milton. Thanks for holding, Mel, and welcome. Mel? Okay. Is it me or does Mel sound like he's like making breakfast or something? Mike, who do you want me to go to next? Carlos in New Bedford. Thanks for holding, Carlos, and welcome.
Good morning, Jeff. I just want to say it's been months for me calling because I'm always on the road with the truck, but I just wanted to send out my deepest condolences to you and the family.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Carlos.
You're welcome. So it's been months. So this subject, so I drive tractor trailer, Jeff, and, I have to have certain requirements, DOT, physical card and all that. And, if I'm up to tip-top shape, pretty much blood pressure and all that, they'll downgrade my license, down to, I can lose my DOT physical card. So I wanted to say this is that, when you have the dumbing down of society, these are the results of what you get of people doing a job that takes a lot of intelligence and the security of keeping us all safe. Whether it's me being on the road with a tractor trailer, a plane in the air. Obviously, the results of what just happened. So to have people thinking that you could have the minimum amount of people or not having the right amount of people inside a tower watching over us, it goes to show you that as a society we're breaking down, and it scares me to no end that this won't stop. And we're lucky that this tragedy didn't happen before. So for Trump to come out and have his deepest sympathies for these people, and then having a liberal station that I listened to down in my area with the host talking about how he didn't even have empathy. This guy doesn't have any empathy. It's really frightening to see these people going to just keep digging on this man, and we're not going to get anywhere with this, Jeff. So I don't know where we go from here.
Let me ask you this, because to me you're the equivalent of a pilot or an air traffic controller, because you're handling a lot of goods. It's a big haul. You've got multiple pieces, multiple parts. You got to be alert. You got to be aware. You got to be smart. You got to be able to multitask. And it's a lot of pressure. Okay, it's a lot of pressure. Could someone do your job paralyzed? Seriously, totally paralyzed? Could someone do your job with no feet, no hands? Could someone do your job with severe intellectual disabilities or severe psychiatric problems? I'm just curious, if they were hiring a tractor trailer drivers and saying, we want these kinds of people with these kinds of disabilities, what would happen, Carlos?
Fill out, when you go to the dentist, you get do you have this, asthma, you have this. I have to fill that out and be truthful with it. So there's no way around it where somebody like that would be able to drive a vehicle. But Jeff, these people are crazy. They're actually thinking about, and the only way this could work is out in the Midwest where you have open roads. But for trucks, tractor trailers to be non-man, okay, would just drive by computer. That's crazy. It's craziness where we are. And Jeff, you said about Wendy's and all you guys joking about. Jeff, I have to literally go back to today for a wheel alignment that I paid for 2 weeks ago. That wasn't done properly. It was done in 10 minutes. By the time he brought it in and brought it back out, he was done in 10, 15 minutes. I'm like, how is this even possible? Jeff, I used to work on vehicles. They tell you it takes at least a half hour, 40 minutes to get everything correct. The problem is everybody's in a rush to make the mighty dollar and to save a buck. That is the problem. Everybody going out for that dollar, but also to save a buck and to cut any safety
they're cutting
whatsoever.
corners. And sloppiness. I agree with you, Carlos.
Yes, correct. With no pride. Yeah. With no pride.
No pride. Exactly.
Yep.
No pride. I'm so with you. Carlos, dynamite call. Please stay safe on the road, my friend, and thank you very much. 617-266-6868. Okay. Arthur in Lunenburg. Thanks for holding, Arthur. Go.
Oh, I'm going to. Yeah. And so,
we wanted to. Thank the Lord it was clean. Whatever was going on there, it was clean. Because you could hear Arthur, and I don't know if he's with his wife or his partner or girlfriend or whatever. Tom in Plymouth. Tom, I've got 2 minutes. The floor is yours. Go.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Hey, I got I'm looking at a pattern here of lack of budget, so you can't hire at the Department of Transportation. Where's the money going? Illegals. How much money do you think they're spending on illegals in the Department of Transportation? Now you go over to the hurricanes in North Carolina. They can't afford, to do any relief from FEMA. Where's the money going? Illegals. Now you go to the fires in California. They don't have any money because it's all going to the illegals. So in addition to the DEI incompetence, there's a lack of a budget. So they can't staff. They can't staff for two reasons. One, you can't find, these creeps they're looking for with DEI. And two, you don't have the money because it's all going to illegals.
Oh, I think it's a great point. It's a great point. No, you're right. It's draining the budget. I mean, it's draining the budget of every department, every agency. And then they complain. They go, well, we don't have enough money to fill these slots. Well, maybe if you didn't flood the country with 40 million illegals. I mean, I know it was 20 under Biden, but overall, we've got 40 million illegal aliens. I mean, Tom, who can sustain this? And this is Trump's argument. He goes, we're going to go bankrupt. We're going to go broke. Like, forget it. If we don't deal with this, we can't deal with anything else. Tom, very, very quickly, we got about less than a minute. Are you afraid or worried about flying now that you hear what the FAA has been doing for the last 4 years?
I'm not, because I've flown my whole life everywhere. But what bothers me is, like you were saying earlier, I can't stand the inconvenience and the lack of service. It's just disgusting. So I just went down to New Jersey to a wedding. It's about a 5-hour ride. I drove it because, if I went end to end and looked at how long it would take, it would be probably 7 hours, just waiting at Logan, waiting at Newark. So I'm starting to drive, up to like 5-6 hours.
Tom, that's what I'm doing, and honestly, that's what many Americans are doing. Tom, great way to end the show. Thank you very much for that call. Okay, obviously there's going to be a lot more coming from this. We're going to keep our eyes on it, but I want to congratulate Trump for having the guts and the courage to say the quiet part out loud. DEI is killing us. Literally. DEI equals D-I-E, die. And it's time we buried it once and for all.